Project Gorgon, an old-school-inspired MMORPG in early access on Steam, is currently on the receiving end of a Phoenix Down after its community donated more than $30,000 in response to the heartbreaking news announced in early November of 2023. I'm Marl MMO, and I connect gamers to MMOs they'll love. Enjoy this interview of Sandra, one of the lead developers of Project Gorgon. It's her story, her journey, that we examine in great detail, ranging from her professional experience in Asheron's Call 1, EverQuest 2, and now Project Gorgon. What's the status of the MMO, and what's next for the player base? These questions and more will be answered in the video. Plus, there are still free keys to the full version of Project Gorgon to give away, so listen to learn how to win. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Srand, Sandra, for joining me this evening. I have to say, I feel like the lucky one here, sharing a conversation with you. I know a little bit about your professional background. My gaming journey has been enriched as a result of your skills and ideas over the course of your career. And obviously our paths have crossed with respect to Project Gorgon. So for those who may not know who you are and how you're connected to Project Gorgon, who are you? What's your background? And tell us a little bit about your story.
So my name is Sandra Powers. I am married to Eric Heimberg, who is the other main dev of Project Gorgon. He is in a lot of ways the driving force behind it. We met and got married while we were working on Asheron's Call and Asheron's Call 2, some MMOs done by Turbine many years ago.
I've enjoyed both of them, by the way. Excellent.
Yeah, it was hard watching what happened to those games in the end.
Yeah.
We were not happy with how Turbine handled any of that. We found that AAA companies were very much about the 500% return tomorrow. And if it was going to take any amount of time, any amount of effort, or if they weren't going to get amazing amounts of money, they just weren't interested in making the game. So that really frustrated us. We really wanted to make these wonderful games. So when we had the opportunity, we went independent, and we started building Project Gorgon ourselves. We did a lot of, it was part-time for a long time as we figured out the engine and the process and all of where we were going. But then we got a game up, and it's actually been running for a really long time now, like...
How many years?
Goodness, I don't want to
calculate. I still remember when you could play it in a browser. I think there was like a Unity plugin or something. You started in that cave with the cow, I think. Yeah, so I've been following it for a while. Now, correct me if I'm wrong. For some reason, I remember reading an interview or a blog post or something in which Project Gorgon, the G in Gorgon, represented like the 8th attempt of getting something off the ground. Is there any truth to that? Refresh my memory.
There is some. The project before Gorgon we called Frontier with an F. The one we thought we were going to do after Gorgon was Hydra with an H. But
Greek ties for both of these. Yes. I studied classics in college, so I appreciate the references.
Yep. Before Frontier, there was I can't remember what the E was for. It was a while back. But there had been several projects that they happened to line up the letters, and so we decided to, conceptually keep going with that. If we were going to make new things, we'd keep going with that.
Now, did one evolve into the other, or was it more lessons learned in one informed what became of the next attempt?
The break there was really the engine. We went to Project Gorgon as its own thing when we started up with Unity, started building it on Unity. Before that, we'd been building, can't remember the name of this software, server-side software, and we were trying to cobble together a client, but it ended up working much better using something like Unity to build the client on the bits, the art and the physics and whatnot that we're not as good with, and doing all of our own homegrown for the networking and the server.
Yeah, I remember reading that you've built your own backend. Super impressive. Yeah.
That's all Eric. That's all Sit down.
Now, with respect to the day-to-day components, Do you conceptualize yourself more as a designer or more strictly a developer? And with respect to whichever answer, what does a typical day look like for you with respect to chugging away at Project Gorgon?
I do a lot of pickup work.
Okay.
When I have the opportunity, I like to design a little system and implement a little system. Sometimes little gets kind of big. The whole genetics thing
Right.
sort of blew up.
That can happen, right? Yeah.
Yes.
What's an example?
I haven't done a whole lot of that kind of isolated design for a while now. I've mostly been working on, I kind of fill in. Eric's like, okay, I'm going to build this new dungeon. Can you build me a wing with this many walls, this many rooms, this many corridors? I'm like, okay, so I built it, I decorated it, and he filled it with cockroaches, but
Right. So world design, it just kind of depends on the need of the given day, the given season.
Yep, exactly. I do a lot of data fiddling.
Okay.
For when we just raised a lot of skill uncaps up to level 90, right? So you can uncap at 90 and keep going.
That happened this week, I think, right?
Yes.
The level?
Yes.
Yes.
Yep. A lot of that, all of the numbers for the additional equipment and additional abilities and stuff was already laid out. But you have to go through. I did a lot of the equipment. A lot of like the level 90 crafted equipment. I'm like, okay, we need this crafted equipment, the recipes, the recipe books, they go here. Make sure you can get them, you can build the stuff. And a lot of the numbers for that was all done. I just had to go through all of the spreadsheets and make sure all of the numbers matched and things lined up and then tested it all. So there's a lot of grunt work in there too.
How much of that is programmatically scalable, and how much of that is, like you mentioned, you have the spreadsheet, but then you have to plug it into the actual in-game systems?
It is our I am very proud of our data content creation flow. We have one of the very first things we built was a big validation system. So whenever we add data, you run the validator over it, and it finds the 18 different mistakes you made that you always make.
Oh, yeah,
forget about.
Interesting. Are these like Excel functions, or are these like SQL queries that you run against the database?
We actually have a bunch of tools in Java that.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I have not toyed with that language. I've used systems built with Java, but I haven't actually programmed in it. That's interesting.
Most of our server is Java. And so
cool, yeah.
the validator just loads up. This is a terrible example, but one of the things we do is it looks at pricing value in councils, right? And so one of the things it does is it tries to estimate where the price should be based on a whole bunch of different factors. And it ends up just rolling over the code flow like 8 times to get a whole bunch of different possibilities and averaging them, because we don't have a good way to deal with the randomization in loot, for example. So the validator will roll up 100 loads of loot and compare it to make sure that there's no problems with the scaling on the ends or anything.
Okay, gotcha. Interesting.
But most of our stuff is very clean. When we write a new type of object, we fill in the validation procedures so that we know what it's going to need to check against other things. Anyway, I'm sorry, I'm babbling. I'm just very proud of our entire validation system.
Oh, no, that's super interesting, because I work in, part of my day job is data integrity over massive data sets and stuff. So that's all super, super cool. Yes, I relate. I'm geeking out with you. And some of your balancing and forecasting, is your team, or is the part of the tool set running simulations, or does it actually generate faux loot drops, and then it finds sort of the median and also determines what those possible outliers are?
For the stuff that we can't do nicely, we really do have it just roll a whole bunch of loot drops and compare.
Okay, gotcha. Yeah, that's cool.
But a lot of the things are, for instance, changing the skills around. The validator was constantly bitching at me. There's you added a.
They're honest. Yeah.
Yes. Say things like, you added the tip about where to unlock 90, but you can't unlock 90 yet. Where is that? And so it will actually check in the code.
Cool. Yeah, that's awesome. That's really clever.
It makes my job a lot easier.
Oh, I bet. Yeah. So you mentioned that you worked with Asheron's Call and Asheron's Call 2. Before Project Gorgon, were you part of any other MMO or RPG releases or title development?
Worked on EverQuest 2 for a little while. I was,
Yeah. Which period, by the way?
let's see, this would have been 2006? Yeah. I had just...
Which expansion pack? Would have been... when did it come out? 2004? Man, I forget off the top of my head.
It was after the really cool fairy starting zone. Do you remember
Fadark?
that? Yes.
Was it? Yeah, that's when I would have started playing, actually, now that I think back in the corridors of my memory. Okay, were you involved in that expansion pack release, or were you brought in afterwards, and kind of, what did that look like?
Same thing, because I was hired to run their live team, and they didn't really have a live team. They had a team that worked on expansions.
Okay.
And I had come from a place where you put out, I mean, AC1 at the time was doing monthly updates. And
Yeah.
EverQuest didn't have that kind of idea. And so Scott Hartzman, their executive producer, brought me in as a live team producer. And I was supposed to help get the, the monthly, the little content updates working within their bigger expansion system. So I didn't actually get to do any sort of content there. I wasn't involved in content creation at all, which made me very sad. I was mostly just trying to get their I guess, paperwork systems to go. Getting engineering to work better with the engineers, with the artists. Engineering to work better with the artists on shorter term stuff because they were philosophically slightly different.
Gotcha. Okay.
So a lot of it was just like getting the build system built up and technical things that weren't terribly exciting to me there. I enjoyed the team a lot, and I enjoyed the game a lot, but I didn't get to work on the game the way I really wanted to.
Gotcha. More back-end personnel, procedural stuff. Yep. Were you kind of like a scrum master for?
Yeah, pretty much.
Before that term was becoming popular.
Now that is a good description. Yes. It is.
Yeah, having to corral a bunch of cats. I forget what the phrase is off the top of my head. But that's really, really interesting. Now, curious, based on what you learned from your time in Asheron's Call and EverQuest 2 and the other details of your professional career, how did those inform design decisions and tooling and navigating, interpersonal dynamics with contractors and other people on your team with respect to Project Gorgon?
I don't usually think about the fact that we are so remote. I mean, I have never actually met Jack in person. Actually, it's funny, when we were hiring him, he asked if I'd call him and that we could have a conversation so I could prove I was a real person. And so I did. I called him up. I said, "Hi, this is Sandra. I'm a real person. Oh, okay. We can go back to Discord now, right?" So, and then I hung up and went back to Discord.
There you go. And this was pre-pandemic too, right?
Yep.
Before the remote was a professional concept of work.
Yep.
So you were a pioneer in many ways then. Yeah, more than just proto Scrum Master, but driving the wedge forward with respect to remote work.
We've been really lucky with the people we've found, though. I mean, I've spoken with some people, some contractors in the past who don't really understand what we're doing and don't understand how to work in a fully remote environment that doesn't. One of the big problems we have is that Citan's schedule just shifts through the day. He has a really hard time sticking to a normal 24-hour schedule. So at any given day, if he's going to be available or not depends on where his sleep schedule is. And so
Gotcha. Yep.
When we're working with Jack, when we're working with Nick, everybody has been, either they get it and we can all work together and everybody's flexible and it works really well, or we've run into contractors who are confused by that kind of flexibility and are happier with a more structured job. Unfortunately, we're very unstructured.
Yeah, which can be a strength if, like you mentioned, if the personalities can find a way to make it work and find that flow. It reminds me, I used to live in California, and even though I try to have a pretty regimented view of life, if I think about like an analogy of surfing, is the ocean has its own schedule, it has its own intensity, and you have to be flexible because if you're not, you're going to get crashed on.
Yeah.
So, anyways, no, I see that. And that's really interesting. So you've been pioneering in that space, trailblazing. With respect to like. Yeah,
I have to stop you a second. It's not so much pioneering as that we are old. We are old people, and we happen to be here as these things happened.
Oh, but it's still cool for me to think back, and I cut my teeth, so to speak, on early EverQuest, UO, Asheron's Call, and back then, I just a kid. And thinking now, having entered the workplace for a little bit, and being introduced to these different concepts of work, and hearing you speak of having navigated these dynamics that I'm learning actively, and this just being a kind of old news. It's really impressive, actually. It's really cool. It's kind of like there's nothing new under the sun type of thing, even though it feels like it is. Is it really?
Yeah, I know what you mean.
Yeah. So what's interesting about your background, and I admittedly I don't know too much about your husband's with respect to development and design, but I was talking. It was either with Jack or I've had a couple of interviews this week with people who have invested a lot of time into Project Gorgon, and I have noticed parallels, or maybe even like features in harmony with Asheron's Call. In fact, I was thinking about the loot system in Project Gorgon, how there's a degree to which it's procedural. It's not as random, and you can clarify me because you obviously are in the back end of both of these systems, but I'm just kind of jogging my memory in that in Asheron's Call 1, what was fun about the PvE loop is that you didn't fully know what the next mob that you defeated was going to provide, because it was this gigantic potential array of what that loot could be. With Project Gorgon, it's a bit more focused, but it's also a strength because one challenging component I imagine from a design perspective with Asheron's Call's model was it could be too random, kind of if you take the extreme end of like an ARPG model, whereas Project Gorgon, it seems like loot is based on your active combat skills that your character is currently equipping, and so there's a stronger degree of confidence that whatever you loot will have a high degree of relevance, although there is still this giant capacity for that procedural effect. Were there influences from Asheron's Call that you've kind of brought into Project Gorgon? What's kind of any history there?
Definitely. When we first sat down and started sketching out what Project Gorgon could be before it had a name, it was very much what were the best parts of AC1, AC2, EverQuest to some extent that we wanted to use, that we wanted in this game that we were picturing, and it was very much about what we had enjoyed in the games. And so Asheron's Call loot we both really loved it, and so that was a no-brainer to try to adopt some of the basis from. It's not just MMOs. I've been playing Diablo 4 a lot lately.
Oh, sure. Yes, we all have.
You can argue if it counts as an MMO or not, but
there's debate. Yeah, I hear you. Yeah.
But it's got a lot of the same. I mean, it's the RPG systems. Diablo as a franchise has a history of having fairly solid, fun loot randomization. The way they do their powers, they're starting to settle in with Diablo 3 and 4. They're beginning to settle into gameplay loops like, do they call them bounties anymore?
I know in Diablo 3 they were. I forget what they're called in Diablo 4, but I know what you're referencing.
Yeah. And so that kind of gameplay has threads all the way back to the old, well, I'm thinking Major Mud now, but that's going way, way back.
Good old Muds. Yep.
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 And so it really was a matter of picking and choosing the parts of gameplay that we had enjoyed the most from the games that we were playing. And since we'd just come from Asheron's Call, a lot of that got... we were very into a lot of that, and a lot of that got carried over as influences to Project Gorgon.
Yeah, even the character development with respect to how flexible it is.
Mhm.
I know Asheron's Call was how do I say this? It, like, if I remember properly, you earned experience that you then invested into
Mhm.
skills, but
Mhm.
there must have been some absolute cap to that because there were fixed levels, like in a
Yeah.
more maybe conventional RPG.
Right.
Whereas Project Gorgon, it seems like that approach has been sidestepped. So instead of there being a fixed global cap per character, it's each skill itself has a cap. But
Right.
theoretically, you could learn all of them. Are there any exceptions to that?
The best of my knowledge, unless Satan did something very strange when I wasn't looking, which has happened, you can learn all of the skills. There are several sets you can't use at the same time, right? So you can't be a druid and a werewolf. You can't have those two skills active at the same time. But you can learn everything. So, and that is actually a good a point about our kind of philosophy, I guess, is that it can be a lot of fun to have a lot of different alts, but it can also be fun to do everything yourself, to have just the, how do I want to say this? Not just about like the your combat skills, but being able to layer in all sorts of different crafting skills, and even the sigil scripting and calligraphy and random little skills like that. It gives us the ability to have a single character that has a lot of different nuance, and you can do a lot of things with for a long time. But you don't have to. You can have your fairy alt, for example.
Yeah, it allows for that preference if it exists.
Yeah.
It reminds me of Final Fantasy XIV. Of course, that version is more restricted in that you can't really borrow one ability from another class. I mean, I guess they have the red mage, so there's sort of an exception within an exception. But in terms of being able to do everything on one character, there are some harmonious elements there. Curious, the casino zone. How involved were you in the development of that area?
I built the structure, and I did the decorations. And I remember on the night that we launched it, I was in tears because the bar wasn't finished.
Oh no!
It wasn't that bad. I'm like, they'll notice there's this huge hole. They're going to ruin the entire dungeon. But no, I was just overreacting.
What were your inspirations for that zone and what it does and what it serves the community for?
Well, Eric had always wanted a Red Wing casino with the mantises. He's extremely fond of his mantises.
I wondered. Yeah, mantises are everywhere.
Yes.
They are cool. Yeah.
They give us an interesting opportunity because they're such an obviously engineered race. They know they're engineered, and they are trying to figure out their place in the world. So they give us as an opportunity to do some stories about from that kind of, I don't want to say fish out of water. It's more like a mantis in water, but
right.
they can be. I apologize. They can be a really fun concept to play around with that way. So he'd always been thinking of the casino as a place where they could really interact with bipedal people and learn more about how other people do things, and be a fun little place and also interesting in that strange mantis way. But I have to admit, part of it is we just wanted a place to put some mini games.
Okay. It's so fun because it reminds me of another reference to Final Fantasy XIV with the gold saucer. Because I remember playing Final Fantasy VII as a child and running into that zone as a kid and thinking this is so cool. And then a couple of years later, MMOs started popping up, and I'm like, what if this existed in a game like this? And what do you know? It's in Project Gorgon. It's like, this is cool. Someone did it. Now, regarding the mantis, I forget whom I was speaking with, yet they indicated from a lore perspective, if one is wearing a hat, that suggests it's sentient. Is there truth to that?
Yes, it is. It's actually, I think, a tip on one of our loading screens.
Okay, hence the sort of ontological discussion they're having as a species?
Yes. Yep.
Okay, I'll have to dig into that. That's really interesting. Kind of reminds me of what I think it was the Han Solo recent, or somewhat recent, I don't know if you saw it, Disney movie in which one of the robots was fighting for equality between what sentient anthropomorphic beings and robots.
I remember that.
Yeah, it kind of reminds me of that, which is a really clever conversation to have. I didn't realize those were indications of an in-game sort of meta conversation. That's a lot of fun.
There's a couple of places in Project Gorgon where we've been able to have some interesting conversations, I guess, about things like this. What do you do if you find out that just some random guy made you, some random, possibly evil asshole created you? What does that mean? What does that mean? What do you do about that?
Right. What do you do about that?
We also have. I'm really proud of some of the storylines about the animals, particularly wizards' familiars that were made sentient, and how does a sentient animal interact with, for example, their non-sentient friends that they used to have? If you're just a bunny
Fair
and suddenly
point.
you're an intelligent bunny, a wizard made you intelligent, and now what do you do with your little bunny girlfriend who isn't
Right.
sentient?
It gets complicated, huh?
Yeah, it really does. And these are, I mean, they're not major themes, obviously, but they're interesting little things that we have the ability to touch on that you just don't find much in other games, I think.
Yeah, there's some philosophy there. That's a lot of fun. Does that tie in at all with the lore surrounding animal skills for player characters?
Yes, it's. I don't think it's unclear exactly where all of the sentient animal players come from. Some of them are wizard familiars. Some of them
Okay.
we're not sure where they come from. So there's some unanswered lore questions there. I'm sorry, I've gone blank.
Oh, that's fine.
Could you? I forgot what we were talking about.
Yeah, well, where we're going with that is one of the unique elements in Project Gorgon is, in fact, its animal system. I say that because in a lot of strictly D&D inspired RPGs or MMOs, shapeshifting is almost always a function of the druid class, and
Right.
a lot of other I guess every once in a while you have a shapeshifter class, but it's pretty limited, and it's usually very temporary for a very specific tactical need. Project Gorgon approaches it differently, and it took me a couple deep thinking moments to really understand, oh, a bunny just flew across my screen, or this duck is flying around, like what is going on? And there's a whole system, or maybe systems, that enable players to metamorphosize into what are basically like distinct classes. I realize I'm somewhat speaking metaphorically here because, and correct me if I'm wrong, Project Gorgon doesn't use the traditional class in the restrictive sense. Like in EverQuest, if you're a paladin, you're a paladin, right? And so these animal forms are basically classes, right? But obviously there are mechanisms to swap them out because you can have two active combat abilities at the same time. I guess what was the origin of that type of system? Because obviously I don't know how many animal combat classes exist, but it's become, in my mind, one of the iconic features of Project Gorgon that's also extremely beloved by the community.
And we did not plan it this way. We did not plan this.
Oh, okay.
So
okay. Interesting.
It's all because of the damn cow, okay? So
In the original tutorial cave?
yes.
No
So
way. Oh
when
my gosh.
We knew we wanted to have bosses with curses. That was
Yes,
a big deal. We're going to curse you. One of the first curses that we were testing turned you into a cow.
Yes,
right?
I do remember this. Yes.
In fact, very early in the, very early, the newbie cave that you start out in, there was a really disgusting-looking cauldron of porridge, and it had warning labels all over it not to eat the porridge. But if you did eat the porridge, you turned into a cow. It was our very earliest test of turning people into a cow as a curse. Was this just cauldron of nasty porridge in the cave, and everybody ate it. Nobody could resist eating it. So then we had all these cows, and Eric started working on cow abilities. I mean, if you're going to have people running around as a cow, you should let them pick things and whatever.
Yeah.
And then it turns out people really like that idea. It got extended, I think, was the deer next, because that was also a druid thing, but you could have cursed as a deer. And then the animal forms just started piling up. They were fun. They're an interesting way to conceptualize how a skill feels in the world. You know, ice magic has one feel, but being a bunny has a completely different feel.
Oh,
Rabbit
sure.
magic.
Yeah.
So, just a way to, I don't know, I don't want to say package abilities, but to theme them and it ended up working out really well. People like those abilities. They really like being animals. And we didn't start out going in this direction, but I am actually very proud of our animal forms.
Yeah, and I think it fits to your point thematically, the vibe of Project Gorgon perfectly. I had forgotten about the cow curse in the original cave, and it's so cool to see how that initial experiment flowered into one of the iconic features of Project Gorgon. So, follow-up question for those listening may not be familiar with Project Gorgon, maybe they read, is regarding the current kind of dilemma. For those listening, how would you briefly describe Project Gorgon? Who's the target audience? Why should someone give it a shot?
We are an extremely niche game, and we know that. Our audience, actually, I'm going to take a quick aside and say that our audience is the most amazing group of people I've ever met. They are hands down one of the best communities I've ever been involved with, that I've ever seen in MMOs, and I'm still flabbergasted. And we built a game, but the community came, and they made a community, and they just, in one sense, they absorbed us into their community, if you know what I mean. And that has just been magical for me. Anyway, so we know we're a little bit niche, and we have a fairly narrow range of people who are probably going to be interested in us. Old school MMO players who enjoyed EverQuest or Asheron's Call back in the day, or it's funny, I think of that as back in the day, but these days, like, I don't know, is Final Fantasy back in the day? Am I that old?
It's complicated with games that have been running for 15 years, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. So it's hard to tell, because I even think players who enjoy Lord of the Rings Online, that this is a perfect parallel experience as well. Even though I think they celebrated their 17th or so anniversary, and so it is incredible thinking back in terms of the 3D space of MMOs. Post MUDs, right? I guess early MMOs were still called MUDs. Anyways, and so on one hand, I do see what you're saying in terms of a niche interest. On the other hand, we've been talking about Final Fantasy XIV and some important parallels, and that's incredibly popular for similar reasons. And so it part of it could just be getting the word out.
Well, you have a very good point there, and I tend to think of us as being tiny and hidden, and that's not true. We actually are a very good, strong game. We have lots of people who have heard of us, and the more people who hear it, I think, all right, I'm going to stop babbling, start over. We have a really good demo. I love our demo. We have, and I think one of the things that, talking about what people can find in Project Gorgon, and I think the demo shows this off pretty well, is a lot of it is exploration at all different sorts of levels, right? It's the theory crafting, making your build exploration, and because you can pair any two skills to get your build, there's an awful lot of customization there, especially since we're so limited on the number of abilities. You have 6 abilities per skill you can use.
So total, correct me if I'm wrong, there's 6 abilities you can pull from each combat skill. So there's 12 primary abilities, but then you have a third hotbar that has some ad hoc abilities. So at any given time, there's about 20 different tactical choices just in terms of the skills you can use. Obviously, there's interplay between all of that. There's so many contextual conversations. I guess I'm having a conversation in my head about which skills I'm using at any given moment, but any choices, right? And so it's not like there's a strong restriction. It's that there are simply the kind of the back end mechanics of how it's tied together. You have those two main ones with the third kind of ad hoc bar as well.
You've actually described this way better than I did. Thank you very much.
Oh, well, I stumbled into that. But it actually reminds me, I don't know if you played much of Guild Wars 1, but you could, so you could cross class. Obviously, for until you reach the end game, you are stuck with your second class. But the skills from your second class, you didn't get access to like the very, very best ones. But the dual classing mechanic reminds me of those tactical choices you have to make, like in Guild Wars 1. And so that restriction to me is actually a cauldron of creativity, because it's not like you have access to everything, right? It's like you have choices. You have to be aware of where you're going. You have to think about what damage types are going to be there. In fact, I've told the story a number of times this week in my interviews. In one of the caves, I think it's based out of Cerebule, there is a golden knight in the very, very back, and the only way to defeat him is by stunning him or making him vulnerable. And at that point in time, I think I was running a archery and sword combo, and I couldn't ever get him down. I couldn't defeat him. And that was a hint to me that I needed to go and figure out a skill of an ability in a different skill line that did have that vulnerability or stun mechanic. I forget exactly what it was. And so all that to say is the game was prodding me to go explore, figure out how to overcome this puzzle, almost like a Zelda style, like you run into this obstacle and it kind of hints to you the solution, but it doesn't give it to you just yet. So like there's a little bit of like algebraic gameplay involved. And so it was a ton of fun, because the game kind of taught me without teaching me. I'm like, this is perfect. This is what a tutorial's like.
We can hit that. It works so well, and I'm so proud of us. It doesn't always hit, but no, yeah, I think talking about exploration in all different sorts of ways.
Yes.
I am not one who really gets into the build exploration. Eric is, but I have a lot of fun watching people doing the theory crafting, the numbers. I love the math that comes out of that.
Sure.
I myself, I am into the locational exploration. I have to go into every dungeon and go into every corner of it. That includes the ones. Yeah, exactly. That includes the ones I built too. I just have to go there and see it and be there.
Compulsionary. Yeah.
And I think we've managed to get some areas have some nice little puzzly bits. So there can be some really fun exploration in that way. The new dungeon that we just launched this week has a lot of little puzzly bits that people are still playing with and figuring out, and some of which are broken, so we're hot fixing those tomorrow.
Oh yeah, of course. Yeah. Well, it reminds me of like the horizontal approach to different other popular MMOs like RuneScape, for example. People can just life skill and explore without necessarily touching combat, or even if you're familiar with Black Desert Online, there's players that only just do the life skilling in that game, and you can find a very harmonious approach in Project Gorgon as well.
I think that there is a lot of space and a lot of opportunity. To some extent, we just sort of sketched out how we were really hoping things would work, right? How we were hoping people would interact with the game, how we were hoping they'd be able to interact with each other through the game, and a lot of that has actually worked. Amazingly, has worked, and I'm so proud of it.
Oh, you should be. Absolutely. Is it fair to ask what your? I mean, whenever someone asks me like what my favorite food is, I have to break it down into like different categories. So is there a favorite feature that you have, or will you need to break it down into a delineated list?
Goodness, there are way too many options. I have to say...
I figured. It felt like an unfair thing to ask, but just in case something sticks out in the moment, something you're particularly proud of.
Spider roller skates.
You know, you're not the first one to bring that up. So for people who are listening, do you mind giving some context to
sure.
that combination of words that I don't think they were planning on having their brain compute?
So, sure. One of the animal forms you can have is spider. I have a spider character. Actually, I think she just turned into the spider during the. We occasionally have an event with a spider near town where you can go and find out how to be a spider. There we go. Anyway, so you can be a spider. And we also recently added mounts to the game. And some of the animal forms obviously don't really look right riding on a horse. Some of them you can put a bunny on top of a horse, but it's really hard to put a huge spider on top of a horse to make it look okay. The horse, just gets this horrified look on his face. Like, what the hell?
I empathize with the horse on that, yeah.
So we were looking for other ways to be able to provide something that looked a travel form, a mount form, something that felt like you were getting up on a mount and going. And for spiders, that ended up being roller skates. They have little roller skates on each of their 8 legs. and they can just sort of skate around. I think that the turbo version with the rocket jets, is that out? Have you seen that? Did we let players have that?
I'm not. That's a great question. I'm curious, what was the origin story of the rollerblading spiders? In real life, that sounds terrifying, but it worked perfectly in Project Gorgon.
It really was just we were casting around looking for something that we could do that'd be sort of cool for this, so that they could have something other than just going faster. And I think it was either, I don't know if it was me or Jack, but we were browsing some of the assets. We use the Unity Asset Store for standard assets sometimes, and it can also be really good for getting ideas for that, see what assets are available. And saw the roller skates, just a single pair of roller skates, obviously. And I'm like, well, if we put one on each foot, can we do this? Can we do this? And
Right.
I think sent that over to Nick, and Nick grabbed it immediately and starts rigging them up, and it was a
Plug
team
and
effort.
play.
Yes.
It's a team effort. And what I love about that story is that when you're enjoying Project Gorgon, I realize this is going to sound ironic, but it still maintains the playful component of playing a game, and that it celebrates its own whimsy, and I think that is just a perfect tone it has.
Thank you. That is wonderful to hear. That is, that's a tone we try to hit when we can.
Well, you hit a perfect C in terms of P&O, not in terms of grade point average. That's so cool. And what's also, and this kind of circles back to an original observation you made, that anyone who spends even a marginal amount of time in Project Gorgon recognizes that not only is the community itself special and arguably uniquely bonded, but the way you and Eric have designed the in-game systems also foster that. And so to me, it's not a coincidence. It may feel accidental, but whenever I've jumped into Project Gorgon, the game itself is sort of magnetizing me to interact with other players, build those relationships, those friendships, share the information that you've learned from this encounter, and the game just naturally just brings players together. And I think that's so refreshing, because in so many of competing titles, it feels like and I have great fondness for these competing titles, the MMO genre being my favorite type of game. But with that said, it can still feel like you're playing a half-baked RPG with just thrown together multiplayer elements versus Project Gorgon. And maybe I'm biased because I grew up with EverQuest and these social first games, but it really feels like you're on an online shared virtual world with other people, linking arms and having epic adventures.
One of the things that we have worked out over the years is that Eric is very much a group player. He likes to group, and I'm very much a solo player.
Sure.
And finding ways to, it's not just a matter of having some group areas and some solo areas. We were looking for ways to make me as a solo player more comfortable with other people, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely.
So looking for a lot of little things. One of our I remember very early we were talking about, we want a drum circle. We want some way for players to drum, and it benefits everybody, and we have no idea how any of this is going to work, but that's the kind of feel. Yeah, people in a drum circle, and they're excited, and they're happy, and then they go off and fight.
Yep.
Sort of together, not really together, but still together.
Totally, yeah.
And so we've tried in a couple places different ways to try and get that feel. One of the things we added recently is a silly little idea, a community chest. Inventory is hard to come by. So
yes, I did notice this. Yeah, keep going.
If you happen to be a very well-established player and you have a lot of money, you can spend your money to buy a slot in this chest, and everybody in the world gets a slot. All the players get access to that slot.
I think it's a genius design decision. Not only does it help curb in-game inflation, but it also directly impacts positively all the players in the zone. It kills two birds with one stone, so to speak.
And we don't have the numbers worked out right on it. The prices aren't right. We're not entirely sure where that needs to settle out.
Sure.
But that's the idea that we've tried to embrace, is other ways to let people be together, like playing music for other people's plants. Little stupid little things.
Curious. Did you or Eric play or study Star Wars Galaxies in terms of their social features?
We did.
I was deeply curious about it because
Yes.
it felt like it's a very nostalgic feeling being in the poetry jam, which for those listening is a community-driven music slash recital slash I'm doing a bad job representing it, but 100 people maybe on average, 50 to 100 every Saturday attend a pub, which from a Star Wars Galaxies perspective would have been one of the cantinas, and there's an actual poetry recitation skill and ability. There's an actual dance skill. There's music performance. There's poetry appreciation, which is your character listening and engaging with it. There's this great social exchange, and all of it provides buffs for your character. So obviously, after you spend an hour enjoying these in-game social systems with each other, whenever you leave, and naturally you're probably going to group up with someone if you want, or if you want to solo, you can. But that is then made all the more effective because you're engaging with the community. And so I have always been wondering if Star Wars Galaxies was a source of at least some study.
Oh yeah, definitely. Eric spent quite a bit of time in Star Wars Galaxies as a dancing. I can't remember their bill, the dancing bit.
Yes.
You can tell I did not spend as much time in Star Wars Galaxies.
Oh, you're fine.
I think it really shows how one of our strengths is that we can be pretty reactive. We have I don't exactly remember how the poetry jam came about, but I remember people were having, getting together on weekends and having little parties, and somebody said something about poetry, and Eric's like, well, I can make them a podium. And so, a couple hours later, we have a test podium that we can start playing with, and but you can't just have a podium, you need to have skills, right? So you have to have the poetry appreciation skills, you have to have all of these things tying together. We're able to do changes and new content quickly. We're able to do it back and forth, do it after having a nice back and forth with our players. And I think the Poetry Jam is one of the places that it's really shown that we can work together to make something weird and new and interesting.
I think that's awesome because I imagine from your background as a professional game developer, I can't speak personally, but I can surmise that one challenge could be the distance between the development team and then obviously the corporate structure on top of that, potentially at times being competitive with the interests of the players. I imagine for every game it's different and there are nuances, but something that I have discerned over the years is how cooperative the development team of Project Gorgon is with the community, and it really is this symbiotic sort of process of osmosis in terms of features being developed and having that open dialogue and conversation between both groups. Go ahead.
We have a decent amount of content that just sort of slipped in because it sounded cool, and then when you're working on
rollerblades.
Yes.
Yes.
Well, when you're working on something like this for a long time, it really helps both us if we can get excited about something just cool and neat like spider rollerblades, and then share it with our players, and they can get excited. It's just one of those neat little loops of meta development.
Yeah, absolutely. And speaking of community, we can kind of orbit around some recent news. On one hand, there's been some challenging dynamics at work. On the other side, the rallying of the community, the banding together to support the project has really been absolutely incredible to see and witness and be a part of. For those listening, go ahead.
We recently had bad news to share with our community. We'd let everybody know 2 years ago that I was diagnosed with cancer. Unfortunately, that has become stage 4 cancer, so that is not going to go well. At the same time, we had run into some problems with money. Having enough money to continue full-time development with the other stuff that's going on. And we, of course, needed to let everybody know what was here and that we need to drop back to part-time development for a bit while we figure this out. And I expected players to be, sad, sure, but mostly disappointed and possibly angry that we had
Mhm.
failed to do better with the game that we have promised them.
Mhm.
And so when people started donating money, I was kind of flabbergasted. I'm like, I don't understand why you're not angry with us. Um,
Mhm. Mhm.
but no, our community is. I don't have the words. I'm going to tear up again. I'm sorry.
Take your time. That's okay.
They pulled together. They donated at this point enough money um, that will keep us able to continue full-time development for several months um, while we work on work with them, in fact, on the best ways to, if we need to tweak our monetization, how we can do this to keep going with full-time development. And it's not just the donations. Everybody's reached out. So many people have such good ideas and things that we didn't think would work, but they have different takes on it.
Mhm. Mhm.
It's just been, and everybody reaching out to say, yeah, uh, it's just, you can tell. I don't have the words. I'm sorry.
Oh, that's completely understandable. I think that a lot of players have been impressed. There's probably a better term for your commitment to the project, considering your health context. And so,
I did
ha-
see in the dev blog that Eric wrote, he said something
Mhm.
along the lines of, sure, Sandra's still dying of cancer, but she's able to work more, and that was a good thing. And I saw several people who read that and went, "What? Wait, what? This seems weird that you're excited that your wife can work." But no, I'm excited because this is my project as much as his. This is our project, our game, and I want to see it. I want to see it through. I want to see it do well, and
and
this
I
is what I
yeah,
want to do. Um,
and I think the community, just as much as this is, a reflection of your interest in who you are. I think the response of the community is basically saying we want to take this journey with you, in that it's reciprocal.
I think you're right. You're very right. I say a lot of things. I'm proud about the game in this way or that way, but I have to say, it really is. Uh, it's not our game. It's our game and their game, our game all together, the community's game. That's really why we are here and how we can still be here. It's that back and forth that keeps us going. Very much the
Yep.
back and forth that keeps us going.
Yeah, absolutely. And I imagine those who have been longtime enjoyers of Project Gorgon want to ensure you get the rest and the relaxation that you need, that you deserve. And obviously they're happy. Probably, I presume, I don't want to speak out of turn, but if development has to slow in exchange for you having better days, I'm sure no one would have a problem with that.
The problems we've run into is that I had been doing just a random assortment of work in various ways. And as I am no longer able to do that, it's tricky to find other people who can fill in. We don't want to have to hire an office manager. That's incredibly expensive.
Sure. Yeah,
But
they are.
but we need to find someone to do the office management that I've been doing,
Mhm.
or at least, I mean, at this point, I have a lot of things streamlined, so I'm still helping with a lot of things.
Well, orbiting the community response, I don't remember off the top of my head, but I believe the last time I looked at the donation meter, the community has raised over $26,000, I want to say, over the span of, it's been maybe less than a week. I forget
Yes.
when the news dropped. And so, even though we're not out of the woods, it feels like you can start to see the rays of sun starting to bleed between the
Yes, yes.
the leaves. And to your point, I mean, the community is also a reflection of you and Eric. I mean, in terms of the systems you've built, your journey, your story, I think that resonates in the game, and you have people that find that frequency, and it really sticks with them. And so I think this is also a reflection of you as a couple and you as a person.
Been contacted by a couple of people who have said, essentially, I can't remember exactly, but one woman said, I met my husband in Project Gorgon. This game
Wow.
cannot go
Wow.
away.
Yeah, sure.
We need this.
Yeah. Oh, totally. Yeah, it's a an oxymoron, but it's a real virtual place, right? With
Yeah, exactly.
yeah, yeah. No, it is special for so many reasons. So I want to respect your time. We're coming up at the top of the hour. Any last little bits you want to share? Any last parting words for our listeners?
Been floored, just completely floored by the outpouring of support in the past week, and we want people to understand that we will take that support and we will do our best to continue making the best game we can for you, because that is what we want to do.
And I'm sure we absolutely believe it. We definitely want the best for you, Srand. Definitely want you to take the rest and the relaxation times that you need. Something I want to end with in terms of, like, I want to circle back to the comment about Project Gorgon being niche. In some ways, that is true. But for those listening, if you've enjoyed the life skilling components of Black Desert Online or RuneScape, if you've enjoyed the being able to do a lot of things on a single character like Final Fantasy XIV, or even the forgetting the casino in that game, the Golden Saucer. Yes, if you like the mini games, if you come from Asheron's Call, early EverQuest, or if you like the build theory crafting side of ARPGs, you can find all of that in Project Gorgon. Of course, it's still in development. Is it technically still beta? It's out of alpha, right?
Yes, we are early access. We consider ourselves beta. One of the things we've been talking about is if we're ready to launch or not. That's a big question, but something we've been talking about.
Sure, we're getting there. Yeah, the finish line is in the distance. It's visible, maybe a little hazy. But there's so much to do. Like we started off talking about, the level cap has been raised to 90, which, come to think of it in context to an early access game, is incredible. It's so unique. Obviously, with respect to it being in beta, they're improving, they're refining, they're adding features, they're balancing. But like I mentioned, even though in some ways it could be niche, it also has features that are very, very prominent in other more popular titles. So if any of that resonates with you, there is a free version of Project Gorgon. Earlier, Srand was talking about the demo. While I guess in most other MMOs, there's just a free trial. The demo, it's available on Steam. And if you choose to upgrade, that's just a seamless process that you don't have to create a different account. That simply unlocks the rest of the game for you. There is an optional VIP. I think it's like $11 or $12 a month, Srand. I forget off the top of my head. And that offers mostly quality of life benefits. I do not think there's an argument for it having any real pay to win stigma associated with it. That's actually one component that I highly admire about how do I want to say this? The monetization, this is, I guess, going to feel weird. The monetization feels old school. And what I mean by that is when, we paid for a subscription to Asheron's Call back in the day, or EverQuest, you just got the game. It's not like you had all these extra features that gave a competitive edge. And similar to that, the VIP makes the game just a bit more comfortable. It's definitely cooperative. There is some consensual PvP, but I think that is definitely more of a minor component. I think there's like a cauldron you can drink its liquid, and that can suddenly turn your flag, but it's definitely more playful in that regard.
I don't, people who enjoy PvP will probably laugh at our PvP system. It's not really meant. It's not meant for prime time. It's just
but
for
that
fun.
Keeps it playful. Yeah, it keeps it exactly. It keeps it fun. Yeah, exactly. And like we've been saying all along, the community is absolutely unique. If the social features and Star Wars Galaxies, if the cantina, the music, the dancing, if that kind of gameplay loop, if that speaks to you, then you will find it in Project Gorgon. So definitely a lot of iconic elements that can be enjoyed, and definitely excited to get the word out. So Srand, thank you so much.
Thank you for that summary there. We get so heads down in Project Gorgon that I tend not to think about that these are themes and structures that people that are resonate from other places. I'm trying to remember the words you said. And so I appreciate you summing that up for that. It's actually, for me, it's really helpful to think about.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. I spend probably too much of my time thinking about MMO design structures. I have like Roth Costers, large postmortems. I have Richard. Oh goodness.
Garriott? Is that Richard Garriott you're thinking of?
I know Richard Garriott. What's his name? Oh goodness, he wrote. Oh goodness, I was doing actually research on MUDs in the history of the MMO genre. Richard Bartle. There we go.
Oh, Bartle, of course.
Yes, yep. So I'm working through his stuff. So, anyways, yeah. So I spend, even though my job is in tech, I spend a lot of my time thinking about the MMO genre from a design perspective and thinking about these harmonious components that like legacy, right, within the genre. So when I play Project Gorgon, there are so many references and it's so much fun. And that just speaks to your experience, to also your willingness to listen to the community, because obviously each player has their own gaming journey, right? And they bring that to the table, and you guys have a listening ear. So
we don't always do we aren't always able to get the best for everybody all together with different competing requirements, but we do try our best.
You definitely balance it out.
Exactly.
Well, thank you again so much. Appreciate you.
No.
Hope the best for you. Like we've talked about off camera a little bit. My wife has some medical elements that have been severe in the past, so I definitely extend whatever sympathy I can. Again, thank you for sharing this conversation. And until next time.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate this. This was a lot of fun.
My pleasure. Absolutely. Thank you so much. Well, have a great night.
Okay, you too. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
As mentioned earlier, another interview has already been published with one of Project Gorgon's game masters, and more content is being produced, including an interview with Project Gorgon's lead developer, Satan. Moreover, to have a chance to win a free copy of Project Gorgon, please download the demo and comment below detailing what you enjoy about the MMORPG. Feel free to include criticism too. I will be in contact with the winners. Thank you for watching, and subscribe for more MMO content.